Hello and welcome to the Subjective Space with Sindhu Rajasekaran. We are joined today by the great Sharif D. Rangnekar. Did I say your name right, Sharif?
Totally fine.
Okay, so welcome to the Subjective Space. I'm just going to quickly introduce Sharif and then we'll jump into all our questions. So Sharif is a writer, he's an author, a curator, workplace inclusion consultant, and singer-songwriter. He is the author of the critically acclaimed book Straight to Normal, My Life as a Gay Man, and this amazing book, Queer Sapien. And he's also the director of the award-winning Rainbow Lit Fest and the Rainbow Literary Awards for Rainbow Awards for Literature and Journalism, which is the first sort of, queer-friendly or queer awards, inclusive awards in India. So welcome, Sharif. So let me start off with my first question for you, which is, you are a journalist too, right?
Yeah.
So let's start with what is the current state of journalism in India?
I think, journalism died some time ago. I think there are many of us who claim we're journalists, but I think I'll just go back a little bit into history over the last 15, 20 years, and not just the last 10 years is what we tend to talk about journalism. I think journalism started changing when marketing started, creeping into how headlines were written, how stories were sort of put out on the first page or the second page or whatever of a newspaper. It was also when I think opinion and news started merging. So in dry news started having adjectives. The press started telling you what's big, what's small, what's right, what's wrong, and that wasn't left to the editorial op-ed pages for you to go and read. So influence, the way the press had at that time, was, I thought, was being misused because we weren't dealing with dry facts. And even in 2007 and 8, when there was a global meltdown and I was a personal business journalist, I remember Kaushik Basu, who was a well-known economist, who said that the way India had somehow managed to survive that meltdown. The way the press portrayed it was almost jingoistic. And, that's not how you should be reporting, because that's how the democracy starts collapsing, because you're getting everyone else to believe that they should celebrate something, even if the glass is three quarters empty. I mean, when we talk about the economy. So journalism has been going down this way for a very, very long time. And now what has happened is we seem to have a number of echo chambers, echo chambers, sorry.
Yeah.
And so it seems like the left leaning are talking to the left leaning. The right is satiating the right and taking over the mainstream as well. So you don't have a space of unbiased sort of reporting, dry reporting of facts. And I think that's hugely problematic, because even the reporting on queer issues is not representative of the queer spectrum as well. So journalism is showing up in a very poor light. I think so much so that I have a feeling that some people don't want to be called journalists any longer. I think everyone would rather be opinion writers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a guest on the Subjective Space podcast, Neelakantan. You may know him. He's a data scientist and an author, right? So we were talking about how facts can be the same sort of set of data, or the same information can be twisted by two different sides in completely different ways. So it's like really where you consume the news, right? Like, is it on this side of the spectrum, this side of the spectrum? So there is no space where we can come together, because it's not like queer people are on the left only or on the right only. They're everywhere, right? It's like, even for any news, like, it's not just for queer folks. So it's like any news, like, we have the whole spectrum. So, which is the thing about India right now. Like, I feel like certain leftist sort of or left of center spaces have really sort of shrunk, or the audience have shrunk. I don't know. What do you think about that? Because I feel like, the major ones have been taken over by the other side.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's left of center or left leaning or left that you want to call it. I think the press, by and large, the mainstream press has stopped asking the right questions when they are interviewing anyone, and if they are interviewing anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think I feel like the fourth estate has become real estate. It's
Mm-hmm.
just owned, and
Yeah.
it's just more of a, I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
we need to ask ourselves that, over the years we failed to have policies that regulated the press in terms of ownership, in terms of intermedia, cross media ownerships,
Mm-hmm.
etc. We don't have that. We've disrespected a Supreme Court order which talked about plurality when it came to airwaves being public property, which means
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a public body. We've not followed any of those things. So what is happening is I see is that questions that should be asked of the powers that be, at the
Mm-hmm.
state or at the central level, are not being asked.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, the investigative journalism is very limited, and it's like a very rare occasion that you start celebrating an investigative report,
Yeah.
and it comes in one or two publications that seem
Mm-hmm.
to have that. The rest is, uh, uh,
Real estate.
yeah. So you don't have that kind of journalism that we had in our time, where we really sniffed, we really went out, we took
Mm-hmm.
time over a story and got to as much fact as we could, ask the people who are involved in that story, for good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
the questions that we need to ask them, and give them that time to respond to
Mm-hmm.
it. That we worked on things.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't really exist. And I think it was Vinod Mehta, the late Vinod Mehta, who was the editor of Outlook, but he
Mm-hmm.
was also briefly my boss at the Pioneer in the 90s, early 90s. Uh, and he had said that reporters are following stories, they're not breaking them.
Mm. Yeah.
So it was like a politician who would pick up a paper and claim there is XYZ in it, and then
Mm-hmm.
that becomes the news.
Yeah.
So it's coming from a press conference or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so everyone just reports that. No one investigates whether that document is fake, you
Yeah.
know, whether there's fact in it, whether there's a perspective. So it's an allegation. So it just became like a boxing match,
Mm-hmm.
and the media started becoming like someone could, shout and allege anything against X or Y. X and
Mm-hmm.
Y may get a chance to respond and then allege something counter allegation, and
Mm.
that's what it's sort of
especially with
mudslinging.
especially with like visual media or like TV. It's
TV is
that
the
the
worst.
obsession with this breaking news. Like, how can you have breaking news every second of the, I mean, you can if you want to like consider everything breaking news, right? But like you rightly said, the sort of taking the time to investigate something properly and look at all the stuff that's out there, and like not to make your own opinion, to even like just fact check and like just
Yeah,
say, okay, this is the thing. I mean, that's sort of been shrinking in India a lot.
but it's shrinking a lot, and actually, during my days in public relations and communications, we got letters from some of the top television channels claiming they broke a story certain seconds before X, Y, or Z of their competition.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, in this coming to us was essentially for us to tell clients that you spend on X or Y channel.
Yeah, they came
But
first.
it wasn't the quality of the reporting or anything of that sort, just that they broke it before someone else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
What is it called? The
dirty.
TRP rating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
whoever
actually,
breaks.
I think this sort of approach started in the press, where one
Mm-hmm.
of the leading newspapers compared the price of the newspaper
Mm-hmm.
with the price of a samosa.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So,
interesting.
yeah. And that was a
So
big campaign,
yeah.
an ad campaign on hoardings.
Oh, I see. So this is something I wanted to also ask you, right? I know you worked for many years as a communications consultant and like for major, major enterprises, and across countries too. You worked in different countries outside of India as well. And recently, I watched Judith Butler. So I watched. She was in London School of Economics, and she was talking about contemporary issues, and she was saying that it's so important for us to make these causes that we care about cool in the public eye, right? That's the only way to sort of capture everyone's attention and to like to
Yeah,
move to get the movement forward, the queer movement or the feminist movement to take it forward, because they've been painted as like sort of like these sort of scary whatever things in the public in the mainstream media, like some. So it's so important to sort of make it something that people can approach, or maybe make it something that is cool. So, as people in PR and communications consultancies, the sort of work that we have done, right? How important do you think it is to sort of center these causes and look at them in a different way as compared to like all of us are selling ideas, right? At the end of the day, so I feel like, do you think there is this false demarcation between, oh, if it's a real cause, we cannot like package it in a particular way and sell it? It should just naturally sort of, I don't know. If you understand what I mean. Do you
yeah,
think
I
that
get
there
it.
is
I
a
get it.
yeah.
See, I really the thing about communications is, and I think the thing about people
Mm-hmm,
and engagement and relationships that you build, friends networks, etc., and all that stuff. It's quite often around common values and common ground,
mm-hmm,
you know and I feel that uh, I believe strongly that we have to find ways to engage with diverse populations. So while you desperately need to be understood, heard, your identity needs to be recognized, embraced. You need to understand our lives and what we go through. You also have to, at some point or very early, start understanding where that audience you want to sort of convert, or you want to build an equation with, because people in different walks of life matter in contributing to change. So it could be
mm-hmm,
journalism, it could be public policy spaces, it could be pressure groups, it could be feminist groups, it could be different sets of NGOs that you're engaging with. So you have to understand where they're coming from, what they know, what they don't. You need to work on making them more aware. Sometimes you have to stand your ground and even be antagonistic, because you need to draw lines on what is
mm.
acceptable and what is not. But you
Yeah.
can't be so rigid.
Mm,
I think where you want to sort of get to a certain point, you have to find ways to deal with the political spectrum. For instance, we, as much as the fair thing would be and the right thing would be, is that we should be part of a manifesto, and we should be a reason people vote for a political party or not.
mm-hmm,
uh, by the end of the day, we need to know the realities that people, by and large, will not vote on sexuality or
mm-hmm,
and being uh, a gay person, a queer person, is not enough to win an election. There may
mm-hmm,
be so many other issues. We are in a country where there are multiple issues. There are so many forms of and kinds of minorities, that you have to realize these sort of nuances when you're reaching out and communicating. So
mm-hmm,
you have to also be a good listener and of understanding your audience, while you want to be heard too.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
it's sad that that's how it is, because you do feel that this right should have been yours from the time you were born.
mm-hmm,
But the fact is, each one of our lives and our lived experiences are such, and they're at a time, a place, a history, a culture, a,
mm-hmm,
a law. All of those factors are contributing to the way you had to live. But to bring all of those sort of changes calls for so much more. I mean, it's the lawyers go into courts and at the end of the day fight a legal battle, or a battle based on constitutional rights. They don't, even during the marriage equality case,
mm-hmm,
when one of the lawyers apparently went around talking about it, saying that they went to so many parts of the country and many people are supportive of us. the court itself says that if you're going to go down that route,
Mhm.
we're not fighting a legal battle.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
S-
so you have to, so it's all back to communication. It is all
mm,
part of the whole larger spectrum of public relations.
mm,
How do you build those arguments in the press? How do
mhm.
you engage with parents? You're hearing more and more folks telling, even during COVID, is that, find a way of remaining safe in that home because you couldn't step out.
Right.
So you couldn't
Yeah, that
fight that
was.
battle in the normal way and just walk out of the home.
Mm, mm, mm.
You had to
It-
find, unfortunately, a way where you have to compromise on who you are.
mm.
That's the problem with coexistence until it reaches a certain point where everyone seems to understand each other, or live and let live is more.
So this is something that I want to delve a little deeper into, right? Because my current research is queer South Asian past, and I
No.
have constantly been taking after sort of the work of Ruth Vanitha and Madhvi
Salim.
Menon, and Salim Kidwai. So I've been looking at how in coloniality, when the British were here, how they criminalized so many things which were actually okay, and there were queer spaces that did exist in India. Not that it was like utopia or something, but that people were always sort of subverting these norms and existing. But we'll come to that in a minute. I just wanted to talk about in contemporary India, the India that you grew up in, the India I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, was largely homophobic, let's be honest. So it was not easy to even have this conversation with anybody, right? Luckily, I had the internet growing up, so I could sort of go and look up, okay, what does this even mean, who am I, sort of, but in reality, like you were saying, like this diverse spectrum of people, right? Like when they did find out, I was first all through my teenage years, I came out as a lesbian, and I was a lesbian. So it was so hard for people to digest that fact, like the people around me in school and my family, and it was just not easy, right? Because there was no conversation around such topics in that time. And now at least I feel we've come as we've made, some milestones have been crossed, and in India there is this conversation, there is this, and you've contributed so much, you and so many others have done so much to sort of make this conversation happen in contemporary India, and things are changing. But how do you see things? As do you think we are poised in a good space to, like, take this movement forward in a much more bigger and better way? What are the challenges you see in contemporary India today, and how much progress do you think we've made?
See, I think, I mean, as you're saying, there's a lot. I grew up before the net really came in. When
Mm,
I came out, I mean, the net was what I could try and run through to, but it was those days where having a computer was a privilege at home. So I used to go to my office early morning. I was a journalist then, and I would surf the net. But we had something called excite.com. We didn't have Google. We didn't.
mm-hmm,
I think Rediff and Yahoo search engines were still to come.
mm-hmm,
And but so there wasn't that kind of information or content available for me
mm,
to make myself feel legit, and confidence. Not at all. Uh, and that has changed, and I think the context of the changes is what Salim Kidwai had said uh, in a piece that he'd written for the Rainbow Lit Fest,
mm-hmm,
um, where he said that our lives were erased as part of a larger global homophobia project,
mm-hmm,
and we were erased from history, from literature, etc. So there were no reference points.
mm-hmm,
So I think what has changed, like with your generation also, and with more and more people writing, is that there are reference points being created,
mm-hmm,
and that over a period of time would reduce homophobia, I would think.
mm-hmm,
And I think we're seeing that change. We're seeing that change. We're seeing parent groups, like one which is out of Bombay called Swikar.
mm-hmm,
Never heard of something like that at our time, where parents are coming out and talking about their queer kids, and they're helping other parents, they're helping queer kids as well.
mm-hmm,
Um, there are other individuals who are coming forth and trying to address things in schools and colleges. There's this lady called Arti Mehrotra who lost her son to
mm-hmm,
suicide a little over a year ago.
mm-hmm,
RV was
mm-hmm,
his name. huge,
Yeah.
uh, you know, this very sad sort of
It's
story.
a big
So
loss.
big loss, and she's now trying to fight for more and more, not only for her kids, her late kids' rights, uh, and but also for other kids.
Hmm.
We wouldn't that wouldn't have been happening, easily even 5 to 10 years ago. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of her courage too, but also the system. Things
Hmm.
have changed to that extent. We have more material being published now. We
Mm-hmm.
see more happening in the press. A lot more influencers on Instagram and things like that. So that shift has sort of taken place, and it augurs well. But whether the battle is easy, not at all, because we're still hearing of suicides, we're
Hmm.
still hearing about violence.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is being reported also. Uh, and also, you're seeing education systems not changing sufficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the base,
Hmm.
because you're going to feel isolated in school
Hmm.
and college.
Hmm.
It's horrible, leave alone the fact that you might be isolated already at home,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. You don't have
Uh,
any reference to anything in your in your school textbooks or whatever.
School
It's like
textbooks, yeah,
nothing.
nothing of that sort. And we
It's
don't
sex
have,
education at school.
so many states have still
Yeah.
banned it, you know.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there is all of that, but there are also so many other laws that aren't there. I'm not even talking about marriage equality, but
Mm-hmm.
there are many. I mean, even after the Supreme Court said that I mean, the Supreme Court had recently had to tell certain high courts that they need to treat queer folks with dignity,
Mm-hmm.
and if they are an adult, you don't need to be sending them to for counseling or sending them back to their so-called family homes. So
Mm-hmm.
in certain courts in certain states and cities, these things are still happening where the courts are not following what the law is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
So,
we have conversion therapies been banned,
oh my gosh.
which is a big deal.
Somebody, when I was a teenager, this was a big thing, right? A lot of people suggested that I be taken and psychoanalyzed and fixed because I was too gay. And somebody else asked me, "Did you turn bisexual later because it's just easier for you, like to just, you know?" And I'm like, maybe, right? Like it's just, I mean, I don't even know at this point. And I think I've come a full circle now where I feel like I'm again taking a lesbian turn, but that's a different story. But let's talk about your book and what
No,
led you
but
to
what
write.
you said about Sindhu
Yeah.
is very much there in the scriptures, right? We'll come to that, I know, which
Yeah.
is fluidity. You
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
have to be in a box.
Exactly. So it's like even the sort of coming out and the sort of putting yourself in any naming, as Madhvi Menon says, a very Western construct. In India, desire is fluid. You don't have to be in any box. You can be desire can be whatever, right? So yeah, you're right, absolutely. So when you tell me about your book, why did you write? Uh, a straight to normal, my life as a gay man. What prompted you to write that book, and then later Queer Sapien, which I read? So what was your journey like? What made you write this book? Was it to, create this space where people can recognize themselves?
I had this desire to write this book, Straight to Normal, earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But then at that time, there were all these fears of homophobia, and I think deep down there was this concern as to how will the family respond, and what would my mom have to go through
Mm-hmm.
if a book came out as an autobiography. So I attempted fiction, but I think somewhere fiction didn't work for me because my life was too real to fictionalize in that sense, for me to write a fictionalized version. I think maybe I'm not educated enough to be a creative writer, or things like that to.
You are a great writer. Let
Uh,
me just say
uh,
that.
no, so I that's not the way I could have,
Mm,
but it when I quit my 9 to 5 job, I really didn't know what to do with myself. So I was just shooting in the dark. And my mom walked in one day in my room and she says, you were going to write that book. I think you better write it. It will maybe help you, but more importantly, it'll help others who might have similar stories, and so they'll have some sort of connection, which
mhm,
today we would use the language as some sort of sense of belonging, a
mm,
reference point, all of those things. And that's how that book came into being, and I wrote it like a reporter. I wrote it in flat 27 days, the
Wow.
first
Okay.
draft.
Yeah.
And my publisher was, and I was ahead of schedule, way ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And my publisher didn't know how to manage the early dates
Yeah.
from me.
Yeah.
And then I only revisited some portions of that book and added a few things to it because I traveled soon after that to
Mm-hmm.
Bombay for something. And I added some elements from there, but I think it was uh, while definitely I felt I was putting out something and using my privilege and the fact that I have that kind of support, uh, to put out a book of that sort. Uh, I think it was also about me realizing my own journey
Mm-hmm.
and the stages. Trying to, even for myself, figure out, did I know earlier or not?
Mm-hmm.
What were those incidences that took place? So it was a bit of all of that that was sort of happening while,
Mm-hmm.
I think that also helped me. So it wasn't like I was doing some great service to the queer community, etc.
Mm. It was
But
like a self recognition or self journey towards
yeah,
understanding yourself.
yeah,
Mm.
and I think writing it helped. Um, and I think Queer Sapien was more of a reflection on
Mm.
life, where I was not only wearing the hat of being a gay man.
Mm.
I think it was me as a journalist. It was me in the era of neoliberalism,
Mm-hmm.
and as a PR man in the midst of neoliberalism. It was political to the extent of issues of caste and identity,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, and recognizing the fact that I didn't know for so long about the various advantages I had.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it was about many things. Which is why I guess that book was sort of endorsed by economists and political observers,
Mm-hmm.
as well as journalists, queer
Mm.
writers, filmmakers. Um, so it was a mixed sort of people because the book seemed to do that. And I think queer sapien was something I much, maybe a lot more than straight to normal, is something I wanted to say. I was
Mm-hmm.
angry about so many things that happened when I was in PR and about the nation, not just about me as a queer person,
Mm-hmm.
but it was about the power structures that we had created
Mm-hmm.
in workplaces,
Mm-hmm.
outside workplaces, the power structure in the press. It was the diminishing space for expression and art
Mm.
uh, in our press and journalism.
Mm.
It covered a lot of all of these sort of things that I was quietly observing for long. So it was like an outpouring.
Mhm.
And as much as it was about my mom
Mm.
having been widowed, and what was it uh, to be a lower caste person in a family that was otherwise Brahmins, what was the north and
Mm.
west, where they came from. So there's
Mhm.
a lot of simple, regular social
I
things
think I lost you there for a
that
minute.
we
I'm just
don't
gonna
talk much
wait
about.
for you to come back.
Yeah.
I just lost you there for a minute, but that's fine.
Oh,
Okay. I heard what you
oh,
said to your mom's
am I back?
that yeah, you're back. I just lost you for like 2 seconds, so that's fine. So that I read Queer Sapien and I thought it was as much say political and like cultural and about all these social things as well as it was very personal as well for you, right? And a lot of things that you write in the book about desire, about all of those things were very beautiful to read because a lot of times people expect when you're writing something about say queer culture or whatever, it's just going to be about how we're marginalized, how we're pushed to the corners, all of that. But there is also so much joy and pleasure and love and all of that to be had in living a queer life, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
really really put that was there in Queer Sapien, which I really enjoyed reading. So I remember speaking to you at the Vidarbha Lit Fest
Oh, yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
about Queer Sapien. That's how we met. So let me ask you my next question, which we spoke about a little bit before, but about queer South Asian past, which is my like jam, right? Like that's where I am right now. And it's just so for me, just to give you a little brief it's so thrilling to just see that so much queer content already exists in our lore, in our myth, in our literature, even. And recently, I found this, entire all this Urdu poetry, right, which is like not only gay poetry, but also lesbian poetry. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And it's just sort of, and to see how the British criminalized all of this, and for them it was just like, with their Victorian morality coming into India, looking at this, going like, "Oh my God, what the hell's going on here? Right? This is not proper. This is not like straight or whatever." And just reforming all the little sort of wins that we have made as a community over so many generations in India. And, the little spaces that were made were taken away by the British, especially to the sort of evils committed to the trans community by the British by criminalizing, uh,
Yeah.
you know, that in India. So can you speak a little bit about? I think it was Transit Day. What was it? A couple of days ago.
Today's trans, yesterday.
Yeah,
Or
yesterday.
yesterday,
Yeah,
today.
so and obviously we can't speak for the trans community or anything like that, but just to speak within the queer movement itself, why it's so, because LGBTQIA cannot exist without the T. The trans movement is so important for us to exist. It's like, and you see the fear again, or the sort of hate towards the trans community, not just in India. You see that in the UK, you see that even in North America. What do you think is the thing that, because in India historically the trans community has held a very important space in society too. Like, you have.
A lot of them were influential when it came to some of the rajas and all of
Mm,
that. They had great access to the royal families, etc.
mhm,
I think India, I mean, there's just so much to be done in the case of the trans community, but I think uh, you know in certain legal aspects, there's been a lot more progress made in terms of a law, in terms of identity cards, in terms of even certain government spaces where toilets are being looked at and things like that. There are hospitals which have special wards for the trans community, etc. Obviously, it's far from complete and far from perfect.
mhm,
There's just so much to be done in terms of their rights and their space in the social sort of larger structure.
mhm,
Because many of them are forced to be sex workers. Many of them are forced to beg on the streets on a Friday. You know, uh, and which is I mean, saying unfortunate is sort of minimizing the issues that the community across has. And there is also not enough understanding of who a trans person is.
mhm,
There is an invisibilization of trans men by and
mhm.
large.
Yes.
Very, so there's, plenty of work to be done.
Mhm,
And but if we go into the history of the subcontinent, I remember during the first of the Lit Fest there was an art historian, a highly respected writer, and one of the few well-known museum curators in the country, Dr. Alka Pandey,
mhm,
who had written also a book called Ardhanareshwara.
mhm,
Uh, so she said that during the Islamic era, it was hedonistic.
mhm,
The whole idea of pleasure, about sex, about love, about lust, etc., was huge, and
mhm,
perhaps that explains some of the poetry and the kind of literature that came out at that point in time.
mhm,
Just like many others would believe that during the British Raj, all these laws came in this prudish sort of stiff upper lip,
mhm,
conformity, all of those things sort of which boxed people and took away freedom in so many different ways, happened during that period. Having said that, we need to understand that most of the history, even written about the subcontinent, which I said right earlier that Salim said was erased, was not only written by British but also written by men.
mm. True.
Even Indian men uh,
Mhm,
who were educated in the West mostly,
mhm,
they were
mhm,
the ones who were writing the history. So they were writing it with the male lens.
Yeah,
Okay, and
absolutely.
so you erased the idea of what a woman could have been. You reduced also in the way history was documented. You reduced the power of women to 1857 and Jhansi ki Rani.
Hmm.
You don't now. You know many more women. Free, not just freedom fighters, but people who fought on in the battlefield, people
Hmm.
who led certain revolutions and changes, we sort of are getting to know all of those things because now women also have a space and
Hmm.
they are writing and speaking for themselves.
Right.
So similarly, I think uh, we've seen women also write about queer
Hmm.
characters. There are also women writing about pleasure
Hmm.
and things like that. Whether it's Seema Anand and whether
Hmm.
it's
Oh, I
Madhavi.
love her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so she was there at the festival last year,
Yeah. Oh.
and so you have people like that who are sort of queering the
Hmm.
narratives and re-establishing not just what the British may have erased or excluded,
Hmm.
but also what men have done
Yeah.
to the narratives of
And
existence of
I
human
just
beings.
I just want to put a little disclaimer here, right? Whenever I say this, that the British did this, and people are like, "Oh, you think like the Hindus and the Muslims and all of them
No,
are like
that's
so
not
inclusive."
necessary.
They're not.
No,
They weren't. People had to constantly subvert and challenge the mainstream norms of those times to exist, but they did, and they thrived in those times too. That's the whole
and at
point.
least you weren't illegal
Yeah,
necessarily.
you
Not
weren't
to
criminal.
say, not to say that the law has completely made us legitimate folks. We haven't, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So and it's true that we don't have enough evidence to show whether there was dignity across
Hmm.
uh, queerness. But the fact is that you did have stories, you did have references like chocolate in a
Hmm.
state like in the area of UP, what is
Hmm.
now Uttar Pradesh.
Hmm.
Uh, where queer boys were called chocolate,
Hmm.
but you had mythology, you had gods. I mean,
Hmm.
you've had Krishna,
Hmm. Yeah.
changing his avatar.
Hmm.
You've had Vishnu turning to becoming Mohini.
Hmm.
You've had Shikhandi.
Hmm.
You have Ayappa.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've had all of that. You've had the Kama Sutra. You've had the
Hmm.
Khajuraho temples, and I
Hmm.
remember Devdutt talking about certain temples in the south where
Hmm.
you not only androgynous beings, but you had um, uh, you know people who appeared to be like men in the sense it's in a very general lay language, having a
Yeah.
moustache, etc.
Hmm.
Masculine sort of looking folks, but having breasts, etc., voluptuous sort of
Hmm.
bodies. Now, what were they and who were they? You
So,
know?
so, so this is something that is also one of my current interests, right?
Mm.
To sort of look into history and find all these mask women, because, like you rightly said, we only have this Rani Lakshmi Bai, one woman who fought a battle. But India is just full of references of women who have not taken a very feminine, patriarchal idea of what it means to be a woman, right? Women have lived in all sorts of ways, and that's a history we don't even tell. So, like you said, that is something to look into, and people are looking into. And I also wanted to add to all the names that you said. Aurangzeb's daughter, Zeb Nisa. She
Yeah,
also
yeah,
wrote queer poetry, and I just recently
yeah.
discovered that, and I'm like, what? This is just amazing. And she was locked up in the end by Aurangzeb because she conspired against him. But she just all this lovely poetry I'm reading now, and it's relevant to me now, in 2024. And it's just India just teems with so much beauty like that, and to think that so that is why coming to Rainbow Lit Fest and to talk about the awards. So, what inspired you to set it up? You're the director and the founder. So, what inspired you to set it up, and why do you think is it important for us to treasure the sort of queer writing that is flourishing in India? I would say, like a lot of people are writing it. Like, is it getting published enough, and what more can happen?
See, I think there is a lot more being published. So I'll just respond to the last bit of your question
Mm.
first. But not enough because publishing unfortunately has become market driven. So if
Mm-hmm.
you don't tick certain boxes, if you don't have that language, if you don't have that same sort of access to an agent or to a publishing house, you're not going to get published, and so a lot
Mm.
of stories will not be covered. You don't have enough bookshops who have gender as a space to start with. So
Mm-hmm.
we've had Kunzum with us last year at the Lit Fest and also part of the awards the process,
Mm-hmm.
and this year too they'll be very much our partner.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're amongst a few bookshops which have an LGBTQ space,
Mm.
a proper dedicated space, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And but then you need that space to be recognized across the publishing world, where the publishing world takes risks,
Mm-hmm.
to because independent publishing houses are doing a lot, but they don't have the same reach.
Mm-hmm.
And you do need at some point reach. You do need to get to more bookshelves, on show windows, and you can't leave everything to an Amazon and self-publish, because you don't have the distribution network with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, these stories need to be heard, need to be read, need to be recognized. So you need more voices out there. So it becomes very discouraging for some folks if they then it gets to what publishing has become, where a
Mm-hmm.
lot of privileged folks can write because they don't have to worry about royalty
Mm-hmm.
also.
Yeah.
So we're in that sort of a thing, and there's hardly maybe 300 plus books in English. But what is heartening is there are efforts for translations,
Mm-hmm.
and material written in Bengali or in Tamil or in Marathi, all of them being translated into English,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa, into Hindi,
Mm-hmm.
like Vani Prakashan. I'm not just taking them first, but they've got a whole Satrangi, as it called,
Mm-hmm.
category, which is basically like a rainbow category
Mm-hmm.
in Hindi,
Mm-hmm.
which hugely inspiring, and it's great because you're going to get to a larger set of people, and social change comes through such
Mm-hmm.
efforts to reach out in languages that are spoken,
Yeah.
in larger numbers. So that all is really good. But the festival came into being during a period of depression and anxiety, but it also was a resultant of some conversations with my publisher, that there weren't really enough uh, queer focused spaces, uh, not just in India but even globally,
Mm.
where you had a festival of this sort where it was conversation. Because you have film festivals, you have Pride stuff which goes on,
Mm.
and at film festivals you might have a session or two, uh, which might, or bring in scriptwriters
Right.
and authors or something like that. But
Mm.
we didn't have a space where it's expression, where we're also talking to people who are writing blogs and or are activists, but not getting published,
Mm.
and people who recognize the writing on the wall, things like that. So my editor, Debakar Ghosh, he was the one to spot that I was going into this. I was sliding,
Mm-hmm.
and which speaks so much about him in that short period of working on Straight to Normal with him.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he just said that you curating these music and talk events. Why don't you just turn it into a rainbow, a festival which is queer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
queer. And so I said, no, I want it queer and inclusive. So
Mm-hmm.
he says, yeah, whatever. He says, you can do a 2-day thing. So I said, no, I've only been doing 4 hours of programming. He said, you can do it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it sort of started. It was to fill in a space. And I think all my personal interests of music, films, dance, conversations, journalism, comms, PR, all of them sort of came together in this. So we have all of these elements at the festival as like ways of expressing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, ourselves. So that's how it sort of came into being. And I think the awards was, which was a more of a later thing. I wanted to do it earlier, but I felt that maybe it's too early. Then I said there is no better time. I don't know whether it's early or late. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Best time is
and
now.
yeah, so and it was really, I think, to encourage, firstly, to bring a lot of material together so that we start, getting more and more people to come out and say, oh, I've written this. It could be a blog, it could be in a not a mainstream website or
Mm-hmm.
a recognized even digital platform. Uh, but it's to get that content out there, but also to encourage more and more people to write. Also encourage the publishing world to print more stuff from the community,
Mm-hmm.
and so to recognize this as a genre. So we do say it's to recognize unadulterated material, and it doesn't have to. The writer doesn't have to be equipped,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because when we include journalism also,
Mm-hmm.
it could be others, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And
think you've done a
and we
beautiful
didn't want to
job.
other
Yeah.
them.
Right.
You've been
Yeah.
on
You
the
don't want
jury.
to.
Huh.
Yes,
You've
you
been
don't
on the
want to other
jury,
it.
Zoom.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh.
So you don't want to other anybody.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we're almost running out of time. So I want to ask you one thing which I've never spoken to you about actually, but I didn't know till I read your bio that you're a musician. I didn't know you had a band and everything. So, or you
Yeah,
were
we
in a
have.
band.
Yeah, we haven't been on stage since August 2022. Well,
Okay.
that's because of personal reasons and other stuff. But yeah, there are two bands. One was Friends of Linger,
Mm-hmm.
and for political reasons, we turned Ling into Linger. Okay,
Yeah.
and yeah, but it did come from thrilling and pulling in Hindi, which is feminine and masculine,
Mm-hmm.
and to be sort of fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And but we had actually released what was reported as India's first dedication to the LGBTQIA plus community. It was a song called Head Held High,
Mm-hmm.
uh, written by me,
Mm-hmm.
the lyrics, but composed by two uh, beautiful straight people,
Mm-hmm.
Adir Ghosh and Smiti Malik.
Mm-hmm.
And Adir was a journalist friend's son, and
Mm-hmm.
I got to know Smiti through him.
Mm-hmm.
And just happened so that her father and I were part of the same group of companies. I realized later,
Yeah.
but that's when the journey started. It started around our first performance was days after the Supreme Court recriminalized homosexuality in
Mm-hmm.
2013 December,
Mm-hmm.
and we've released a fair bit of music, and there's plenty of music lying on this computer which hasn't been released and hasn't been put out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Queer and otherwise stuff out there, and it's just happened entirely by chance because I love music. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a trained singer. I don't know how to really write lyrics, but it was
So do you
poetry being
sing
turned
or do you
sing.
play an okay,
No, and
right.
I sing, and I can use the shaker.
That's
Yeah,
a good thing to do.
yeah, no
Okay.
instrument.
Okay. But
As
that's
such.
a cool though. So have you performed at the Rainbow Lit Fest?
We did perform at the first festival. We performed
Okay.
as the original knockoffs, which was considered India's most diverse band. Some of
Mm-hmm.
the artists from Panama, Congo,
Mm-hmm.
Siliguri, Chennai,
Mm-hmm.
Pune, Delhi, Goa. It
Mm-hmm.
was that sort of a mix.
Oh, lovely.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to see this at some point. I'm gonna Google you and see this now. I'm gonna find some of your songs. It must be there somewhere, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, some of it
Okay.
is there. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go look it up. So thank you so much, Sharif, for joining me and
No,
chatting with
no,
me all
thank
this
you.
time. I had a lovely
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Take care.
Um,
Thank you so much. And
I'll just stop the